Welcome back to our America's Future Series, Space Innovation Summit. I'm Scott Murray. He is David Hamilton. He is the founder and CEO of the America's Future Series, and we're delighted to welcome you on this Thursday. As we continue on with our program this morning, we're going to introduce to you a gentleman that is the U.S. Air Force Business Development Lead for TMGcore, a two-phase liquid immersion computing company focusing on HPC and edge computing, and he's also the CEO of SBIR Advisors. So he has over 8 years of experience as an Air Force contracting officer working in top secret procurement, and we are delighted to welcome. Did I get it right, Sam? Sound good?
Yes, sir, you did. Thank you so much.
Sam Riehn, you look great. Thanks so much for stopping by this morning. It is all yours, my friend.
Appreciate it. Can you hear me all right?
We sure can. You sound great.
Awesome. Great. Well, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Robert Leahy. Robert is a Georgetown graduate from class of '84. He also has a master's from the George Washington University and National Defense University. He has an 11-year career at the Internal Revenue Service, where he was the associate CIO for strategy and planning, before moving to the Office of Personnel Management as a Deputy Chief Information Officer, and then came back to the Internal Revenue Service in 2018 to take the role of Chief Information Officer for Operations. And most recently, in February 2020, just before the pandemic hit, you moved over and took over as Chief Information Officer and Director of IT and Communications at NASA. So, wow, what a career. I'm so excited to have you, and I'm glad that we get to ask you some questions today. How are you doing?
Good, Sam. Hey, one thing to make clear, I'm the CIO at Goddard Space Flight Center, which is one of 10 NASA centers. We also have an agency CIO, and that's Jeff Seaton. So just make sure that's clear.
No, excellent. Thanks so much. And please tell us a little bit more about the Goddard Space Flight Center, and what you guys are up to out there.
Well, Goddard Space Flight Center is about 12,000 folks, a combination of civil servants and contractors, one of the premier science centers in the entire world, focus on earth science, planetary science, all types of science. We operate about 85 different missions right now, missions being satellites that are out, across the universe. We've got a big launch coming up in December, the James Webb Space Telescope, which will be about 100 times more powerful than the Hubble Space Telescope, which most folks are very familiar with. So we do a lot of science, a lot of exploration. We also, on the technology side, support the entire human spaceflight mission across NASA. So we do a lot.
Awesome, thank you. Well, in your role, maybe you can tell me what keeps you up at night from a cybersecurity perspective as the CIO of NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center.
So overall, NASA is one of the most attacked federal agencies, if not the most. Every day we're dealing with hundreds of millions, if not billions, of attacks. So what I'm really worried about, and what really is keeping me up, is the hackers out there, the nation states who want to do us harm, who want to steal our technologies, who want to, perhaps do harm to our missions, our assets like satellites and things like that. That's my big concern: is are they going to be able to breach our systems and do us harm? There's so many attack vectors. We interact with international partners, with universities, et cetera. So how do we keep ourselves secure in today's environment, in today's very, very dynamic environment?
Awesome. Thanks so much. And to everyone listening, I am going to come to the Q&A here in just a minute. So go ahead and please ask your questions of Mr. Leahy in the Q&A section. While they're doing that, I did want to ask, what does IT assets mean for NASA? You mentioned that in just a minute ago.
So we basically think of it in two buckets: the institutional assets, like the laptop that I'm using to communicate with you, the corporate network, the backbone, things like that, is more the institutional assets. What allow us to do our daily job. And then there's the mission systems, and those are a combination of ground systems, flight systems, space systems, et cetera, that are doing, the real core mission of NASA, whether it's research, exploration, supporting human spaceflight, the International Space Station, our next mission to Mars, the Artemis, that's planning to put a first astronaut of color, the first female astronaut on the moon in 2024. Those are our mission systems, and they are generally designed and operated by our systems engineers, literally our rocket scientists, et cetera. And how do we keep the mission systems cyber secure? Those are non-standard systems, very often built by contractors, and they may use some of the same infrastructure platforms that we're very familiar with, but they need to make changes. They need to upgrade them and do different things to make them operate in the space system. So those are the two types of categories that we think of at NASA.
Thank you. So what are some of those cybersecurity challenges you face on a daily basis?
So on the institutional side, it's what you all face, what everybody faces in government and in industry. It's the attacks from cyber criminals, from nation states, et cetera, trying to breach our systems, take our data, ransomware, whatever it may be. On the mission side, it gets a little more complicated because these are assets, in some cases physical assets. You've got satellites orbiting the Earth. My concern is somebody going to be able to take over telemetry of a satellite and do something inappropriate with that, as we've seen with some recent breaches where not necessarily at NASA, but throughout organizations where bad actors are able to move laterally, so move from one set of systems to another set of systems. And what does that mean? What could they do? Could they damage, one of our very sensitive instruments, for example, Hubble, or as I mentioned, James Webb is launching in December. Could damage be done just by changing the trajectory or where those instruments are focusing? So you're trying to keep all those systems safe and secure, and it's a huge challenge.
I bet. What are some of your approaches to those challenges?
One of our main approaches is to make sure that we're building cybersecurity into everything we do. On the mission side, we are beginning to infuse cyber engineering right from the beginning of the project, from its core inception, making sure that we've got cyber engineers there. We also use the authorization process to make sure that we understand risks, so we make risk-based decisions, and make sure that we have proper controls in place. We're tracking everything, all the standard things. But again, we've got those challenges because the mission systems are owned and operated by the engineers on NASA, and we have to make sure that they understand the needs for cyber, A, and B, how to implement. And in some cases, we have legacy systems that are 30 years old. I mean, Hubble has been orbiting the Earth for 30 years, and we're not going to necessarily go up there now and replace some of the hardware or software. So how do we work with what we've got, especially on the ground systems that are connecting to them, to the flight systems?
And so is that also kind of how you think about or address your mission challenges? Did you kind of already answer that, or can you talk to that side?
Well, it's interesting because when I first came on board about 20 months ago, one of the things that I heard quite loud, especially from our scientists, is the more money we spend on cyber, the less we're going to have for science. Understand that totally. However, that's going to change. That equation is going to change if we lose a mission, right? If we get hacked and we have ransomware come in and bring down a mission, or our data is sucked out, whatever it may be, if we lose a mission, we're going to be in a world of hurt. So we have to invest. We have to invest wisely, and we have to make trade-offs. That's what cyber is all about: is making that risk determination and deciding, are we doing enough? Are we okay? Or what are those risks that we can accept, et cetera. So it's that trade-off.
Well, I know most people don't equate, cybersecurity with customer service. So how are you making certain that IT security doesn't really get in the way of your employees doing their work?
It's interesting. We are having a cybersecurity day at Goddard today, where all of our employees are invited, and we bring in several outside speakers from other federal agencies to talk about cybersecurity. And I got to do the introduction earlier this morning. And it really is about enabling the mission, making sure that people are able to do what they need to do. One of the phrases in the NASA mission statement is to, and for the betterment of humankind. And, so it's not about making sure that our network is fine, or, people can use their laptop. It's how do the end users do what they need to do? So if it's a scientist, are they able to access the data that they need? Can they share it appropriately on a website? We have huge amounts of sharing of data. I'm told that we have the most number of public websites of any federal agency. So it's amazing the amount of data that's there, the amount of scientific data. How do we get students engaged in STEM? That's one of our big emphasis right now across the country, and especially in disadvantaged communities. How do we get students more engaged and more interested in STEM, because they can help us solve the world's problems. Climate change. We are one of the leading, if not the leading, scientific community on climate change. So supporting the initiatives that the Biden administration has, that we're trying to do to turn the corner on climate change. So to do that, though, you have to be safe, right? The analogy I like to use is your front door, right? You're not going to go out and leave your front door open or leave your keys there and then come back to who knows what. We've got to make sure that we're safe and secure, that we have more than a firewall. We need to have layered security to make sure that we are, we're doing the right things.
Awesome. Well, I want to come back to what you talked about, IT assets for you guys. Are you guys doing a lot of things out on the edge? And you mentioned data, how much you guys, I imagine amazing amounts of computational data that you're handling. How are you addressing the compute, and are you looking at doing that compute on the edge?
It's interesting. My sister, one of my sisters, is a CEO of a tech company, and we were talking recently, and she said, "Are you doing any edge computing?" And I had my institutional hat on, and I said, "Well, no, not really. We're focused internally." And I thought later, I said, "Wait a minute. We're like the definition of edge computing." Okay, we've got scientific instruments out there in the universe, well beyond the Earth, where they are computing. The Perseverance rover that landed on Mars. There was not someone with a joystick landing that. Okay, it's a 15-minute or so time lag for the communications to come from Mars to the Earth. So you can't do that in real time. So it literally is on the edge. And the helicopter that we flew on Mars, it only weighed, I think, 4 pounds. That is edge computing. So yes, we are doing a huge amount of edge computing, whether it be in instrumentation or in flight dynamics, et cetera. I mean, it's just amazing the type of compute that goes on. And then we gather data and bring it back to the Earth. So one of the things that we're looking at is how to improve our communications bandwidth from space to the Earth. We have a project that's going to be launching soon, a demonstration project to look at the use of laser communications, which would increase our throughput significantly. Our ability to get data back from space and then process it, in various locations on the Earth.
Awesome. Well, I'm still waiting on some questions to come in through the Q&A here, but as they're coming in, you meant talking about bringing that data back to Earth, and why would you want to do that? Is that because you're running analysis on that data, here on the ground?
Yes, we actually, NASA has 2 supercomputers. We have one at the Ames Research Center out in California, and we actually have one on site at Goddard. And those are 2 of the types of processing that we do, but we have petabytes of data. I mean, just unbelievable amounts of data. With scientific experiments at Goddard, where the scientists have designed the experiments using the instruments that are in space to process this information, try and make sense of it. I was in a briefing not long ago with a project where they're able to basically identify every tree on the Earth, and they showed one presentation, one part of Africa that is very dense with trees, but they could actually pinpoint and count the individual trees from satellites. And of course, that information, the satellites is taking the image and using certain types of image processing, sending that data back to Earth, where we are now processing it and really working through it. It seems like every few weeks you'll hear about a new discovery from Hubble. In some cases from data from years ago. That information, that data has come back, and it takes time to process that. So people are always processing it. They're finding new ways to look at the data to try and find that needle in the haystack. So we've got, as I said, we've got supercomputers, we have other computing sites. We're moving very aggressively towards cloud computing that would enable us to have standard controls across all of our projects from a cyber perspective, potentially be more effective and efficient with the use of our systems and our computational power. We're also talking about quantum computing, of course, and that different shapes from just sensors to different types of computing. Of course, quantum has very few commercial applications at the moment, but there's a lot that we're really looking at that could really help in the future. And so you're moving out on quantum, et cetera.
Are there any ongoing projects or programs where you're looking at actually being able to process and analyze that data at the source and at the point of collection? So instead of trying to pipe it back down to Earth, you can actually do that on the edge.
So one project is not necessarily space, but it's getting to space. We have a project where we're working on an automated system that would be used by launch vehicles to basically abort the mission. So if something's going wrong during a launch, it would be an automated process to abort. So that's one example of software that we're working right now on. It's in testing, and a commercial company has produced this. And that would be a software product that would be available for industry also, not just for NASA launches, but for industry. What's interesting, of course, is as we get further away from the Earth, yes, we're going to need more and more of those autonomous processes to be able to, deal with the information in hand at time. When the Mars Perseverance lander was landing on Mars, there were autonomous controls on the vehicle to find the best place to land. Okay, it was not preset, we're going to go here. It was they had to use various types of radar and LiDAR and things like that to scope out the landscape and find a place that would be safe to land. And so, yeah, there's definitely autonomous computing going on out there. We think of that to a degree as an AI type of function, but it's a compute function. It's similar to autonomous vehicles on the Earth with some of the cars that we see now that have some of that built-in capability.
Excellent. Well, we are getting some questions in now through the Q&A, and one of them comes from a friend of mine, Nate. It's good to see you in the chat, but he says, how are you rapidly complying with NIST 171, 53, CMMC levels for edge computing that addresses DoD and public sector needs?
Oh, gee, so we're doing our best, okay? Rapidly complying with new requirements coming from NIST or from anywhere else is always a chore with a large federal bureaucracy where our funding is set, in fiscal year cycles and things like that. So we're absorbing the requirements. We're looking at what do we need to do to adjust, et cetera, et cetera. Another example of this is the executive order from President Biden in May on cybersecurity. It has a lot of implications, and we are, just kind of plowing through it and doing the best we can. There's only so much pivot room or agility for existing platforms. So we're doing, as I said, just doing the best we can to absorb and determine how best to comply and make sure we do it the right way.
But those, am I fair to assume that those are responsibilities or requirements that you oversee?
I'm part of the team that oversees them. I'm the center CIO at Goddard, so I am responsible and accountable for the cybersecurity. Do I have a full authority over everything that's going on? No, so I have to work with my partners to implement what we need to do. We also have a I have a cyber team. The agency has a cyber team. They're very tightly integrated. And so we get this information coming in from the agency with agency policy, and then we look to implement. We provide guidance and feedback. We work in a collaborative manner, but ultimately it comes down to making sure the systems owners understand what those requirements are. And those are my peers. Those are the folks that I'm working with on a day-to-day basis, attending the senior staff meetings, the strategy meetings, et cetera, at Goddard, to make sure that we do what we need to do.
I gotcha. Thank you. And you hinted at this earlier, but there's a question on this that does NASA monetize their data, or is it all publicly accessible? You talked about releasing some capability to industry.
Great question. I'm not sure we monetize a lot. We have programs actually that are set up to seed industry or seed companies with technologies or with data. Generally speaking, our data is not necessarily monetized by NASA, but we're a public agency. We're set to gather information and provide it provide information and data to the public. So generally speaking, that's not what we're about. We're not a private entity. We're not about making a profit. We're about bettering humankind. And there is so much more that private industry, that individuals can do. I mean, we encourage the backyard scientist to help. We have a lot of data out there where we have folks who can look at this and analyze it and have found things, made discoveries, if you will. One of the things that we're really moving towards too is, as people who follow the space industry understand, instead of building and launching our own space vehicles, or in what we've done with human spaceflight for about a decade, working with the Russians, we're using industry. Like right now, SpaceX, we have actually a launch this coming weekend, Crew 3, with 4 astronauts, to the International Space System, space station. So we're contracting. We're doing a lot more of that work with industry to allow industry to do this. And the number of satellites, the pace of launches and deployments of satellites is increasing significantly. We're just seeing a huge increase. So we want to facilitate that. We're not owning the space, so to speak. We want to facilitate the growth and the monetization of the space industry by private sector.
Awesome. So what's the best way for that private sector, for those industry partners to connect with you guys and work with you to either help you on the lessons learned side of those cyber requirements, or actually providing capability to the Goddard Center?
Well, there's a lot of ways. I mean, just in the regular course of business, we have RFIs, RFPs that go out, et cetera. We have a lot of different partners. We use, I'm in Greenbelt, Maryland. I've been in the Maryland, DC area for 30 plus years. There's a lot of integrators that cross the space, across the federal agencies, who work with NASA, work with other agencies, et cetera. So that's a way to understand our technologies and help us, find new ways of doing things. I get, multiple emails a day from people just reaching out. That's not super effective. It's a matter of, working with someone who's already on board and on the ground with us to help us solve real problems.
Awesome.
Does that help? Does that help them?
I think it does. Yeah. I wanted to hear you say, well, here's my email, reach out to me and we'll send you money, but that's, it's not the way it goes.
I get way too many a day to respond to everybody. So.
Yeah, I've got a really cool, interesting question here in the Q&A. Sure. And to kind of switch gears a little bit, said, is NASA concerned with non-kinetic conflicts on the moon, like electronic warfare against our autonomous vehicles?
That's a great question. When we're talking warfare, that's not exactly NASA's thing. Okay, that's really more on the military side. The military has a lot of assets, space assets and things where they very much do focus on active threats, physical, electronic, nuclear, et cetera. On the moon, we actually are partnering. We have so many international partners. I mean, the Russians are an international partner with us, even though we're more of an international rival with Russia and diplomacy and things like that. So yes, we are concerned. and we do everything we can to certainly ensure safety. But I think, frankly, with the moon and with space, there's much more collaboration than there is on Earth right now. Yes, there's somewhat of a space race with China. They've got a new space station that they've just sent astronauts to. They're looking at doing landers on the moon right around the same time, if not quite a little bit earlier than we are. So yeah, there's a rivalry, but it's not necessarily, my perspective at least, seen as a military rivalry. But of course, on the defense side, there is always that concern. So there's always that look at it.
Awesome. And then is NASA a good place to go? You mentioned talking and working and liaising with the other countries and regions. For private industry, is NASA a good belly button to connect to some of those other countries' space programs?
Oh, I think so. I mean, we partner with the European Space Agency, with JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, of course, with Russia, with the space station. So yes, in Canada, the Canadian Space Agency, CSA, the Webb telescope is a partnership. We're actually flying on a European launch vehicle in December. So, and Canada has got instruments on board too. So there's a lot of partnership that goes on, and there's a lot of shared responsibilities and things like that. So yes, NASA is a good way to start to gain those entrees. We actually are support launches in New Zealand. We've got a team down in Australia right now, a large contingent that went down last month to support work going on Australia. So yes, we do a lot of work with the international space agencies.
Awesome. Thank you. I've got a question here from Anna. It says, my son-in-law has begun a cybersecurity career and would like to learn of NASA opportunities for the same. We are in the Washington, D.C. metro region, which I think you said you're around there. Are there any events that he can attend to network, meet decision leaders, etc.?
Oh, great question. You know what I would say is check the NASA website, check the Goddard website, and don't limit to cybersecurity. People come in as computer engineers. We need computer engineers with cybersecurity experience, and not just in the IT organization, but in the missions organization. We have a large internship program. It's competitive, but it's a great way for people to get into NASA. And now we're doing the internships virtually. So we'll also look at the other centers. We have 10 NASA centers across the country. So there's always going to be opportunities, and cybersecurity is a big one. Cybersecurity field is, the unemployment rate is essentially zero. So we have trouble hiring folks in cybersecurity. I will say too, we leverage our contract partners in cybersecurity quite a bit. So that's also a great way to get into NASA. We have, I know many people who spent 10 years or so, let's say, on the contract side, and then they were hired as a civil servant. It's a great opportunity to get your foot in the door, so to speak. Hope that helped.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And then back to the Webb telescope. What are the most recent developments for the Webb telescope, which could not be achieved in an earlier mission? So what's totally new and will bring a huge change in the discoveries?
So here's the way I understand it, and I'm not a scientist. It's going to be it is so powerful. It's 100 times more powerful than Hubble. And the way I heard one scientist describe it in a recent meeting was one could focus on something about the size of a peanut at the distance of the moon from Earth. So think about how far the moon is, I think 250,000 miles, give or take, and being able to focus on a peanut at that distance. The instruments are so powerful. There's also different types of instruments to look at different spectrums of light. The sheeting that they have, or the sun shields that they built these multiple layers of sun shields. So it's going to go and it's going to be on the other side of the sun and be able to look out across the universe. And there's either 5 or 6 layers of sun shields that they built with special special material. and they're designed so that the heat from the sun has a way to be dissipated. And we're talking about space, okay? And space is extremely unfriendly to everything, to devices, to people. It's cold, it's hot, cold and hot at the same time, depending which direction you're facing, so much radiation, etc. So to be able to use those instruments and point them away from the sun and look and see what's out there, and scientists are anticipating they're going to be able to see back over 14 billion years to what is theorized as the beginning of the universe. So the science that we're going to be able to do is unbelievable. They've had competitions for science projects. They've got, thousands of people queued up, scientists queued up for the data when it starts coming back. So, it's just unbelievable what I think it's going to be able to do. I mean, if we think of some of the things that the Hubble has been able to do, how it's changed our understanding of the universe, this is going to is like an exponential leap beyond that. So everybody's quite excited about it. We actually have a large team already in French Guiana getting ready for the flight in December, and we're going to have a large contingent of people there at the time.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
I see Michelle and David on. How are you guys?
Wonderful. Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Is that my cue on time? So thank you so much, Robert, for answering our questions and for joining me. Thank you for everyone in attendance. And of course, thank you for America's Future Series for hosting us.
Well, thank you very much. And Robert, before you go, hey, my son is a finance major and he really would be interested in one of those internships. So we're going to have to figure out do they need anybody else besides cyber?
It's everything. It's everything with the internships. Yes.
Could there be anything better than to be a young person working for NASA? I can't imagine.
I've met some of the interns. They do at the end of each of the classes, they do a presentation on their projects that they do during the course of the year. And it's just unbelievable what these young folks, whether it's in cyber or science, what they're able to bring and the fresh looks that they bring to what we're doing. It's just, we're in good hands with the future generation, I think.
That's fantastic.
Good to know.
Thank you.